Good morning everyone. Today, I want to talk about something simple, yet deeply meaningful, the phrase one of the most powerful. Now, you might ask, powerful in what way? Let me tell you, not in muscles, money, or fame, but in character, resilience, vision, and impact. One of the most powerful things in this world is a personal development. Who you are today is not who you have to be tomorrow. Every human being has two versions within them, the one that is shaped by circumstance and the one that is driven by choice. Personal development isn't about becoming someone else. It's about revealing the powerful version of yourself buried under years of doubt, fear, and excuses. You weren't born average, you were trained into average. But today, we train you back into excellence. You can't change what you're not aware of. The first step in personal development is being honest with yourself. What are your weaknesses? What triggers your procrastination? What beliefs are holding you back? Without self-awareness, you're walking in darkness with no map. Motivation is a spark, but discipline is the fire that keeps burning. People wait to feel inspired, but the most successful people act without emotion when necessary. They show up on the days they don't want to. That's where greatness is built, not on the highs, but in the valleys. What you read, watch, listen to, and who you surround yourself with, all shape who you become. You can't expect to grow if your mind is fed daily with garbage. Personal development is intentional programming. You are either programmed by the world or you choose to program yourself. Goals are outcomes. Standards are who you become. Don't just aim to lose weight, become the person who never misses a workout. Don't just aim to earn money, become the person who creates value daily. When your standards rise, your reality follows. Failure is not a sign to quit, it's a sign you're growing. The people who grow the most are the ones who risk the most. They fall, but they rise faster. Every time you fail, ask yourself, what did I learn? How am I better now? Growth isn't always pretty, but it's always worth it. In a world filled with distraction, focus is your edge. Learn to say no to everything that doesn't build your vision. Cut the noise. Turn off the notifications. Mastering your focus is like building a laser, and that laser can cut through the hardest of obstacles. You will always act according to who you believe you are. If you see yourself as lazy, you'll behave that way even if you want to change. Upgrade your identity. See yourself as the disciplined, driven, bold version of yourself. Every action either reinforces your old self or builds your new one. So today, make a choice. You don't need more time. You need more intention. Start where you are, use what you have, and commit to growth no matter how uncomfortable it is. The best investment you will ever make is in yourself. This is your life. This is your time. Grow through it. Evolve through it. Become who you were born to be. Self-awareness is the starting point of all personal transformation. Without it, every habit, every strategy, every plan you create is built on a foundation you haven't examined. Before you can become who you want to be, you must come to terms with who you already are. And that process, while often overlooked, is where the true journey begins. Most people think they know themselves, but they are wrong. What they often know is the version of themselves shaped by years of repetition, opinions, conditioning, and survival. They believe their behaviors define their identity, but behavior is often a mask worn to survive the environment, not a reflection of truth. That's why so many people spend their lives feeling like strangers to themselves, frustrated that change feels impossible, unaware that the real issue is that they've never paused long enough to become deeply honest with their inner world. To develop yourself, you must first observe yourself, quietly, without judgment, without distraction. It requires courage to sit in silence, to turn off the noise, and confront what's been buried under years of autopilot living. The modern world, with all its speed and stimulation, actively fights against this. We're constantly distracted, overstimulated, and underconnected, not to others, but to ourselves. We scroll through curated highlights of other people's lives, absorb endless opinions, and drown in comparison. But when was the last time you scrolled through your own thoughts? When was the last time you observed your own behaviors from the outside, not to criticize, but to understand? Real self-awareness isn't about perfection or even self-improvement in the traditional sense. It's about ownership. It's about saying, this is where I am. This is what I do. This is how I react. And now that I see it, I get to choose differently. Without that choice, you are just a puppet to your past. Your habits, beliefs, fears, all formed when you were young, run your life like invisible software. And if you never check in on them, if you never consciously ask where they came from, they will guide every decision you make without your permission. Consider how many people live their lives reacting. They get angry without knowing why. They procrastinate but can't explain what they are avoiding. They enter the same toxic relationships repeatedly, each time believing, this time it's different, only to find themselves reliving the same emotional patterns. That's not coincidence. That's a lack of awareness. When you're unaware, you live on repeat. You're like a song stuck on a loop, playing the same tune no matter how much you want to hear a new one. Awareness is how you hit stop. Awareness is how you change the record. But here's the hard part, awareness is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront the truth that maybe you've been lying to yourself. That maybe your victim mindset has been a safety net. That maybe your ambition was never yours to begin with, but something inherited from someone else's expectations. And that kind of realization can feel threatening, because it shakes the ground you've been standing on for years. But here's the paradox, that shaking, that disruption, is where freedom begins. You can't escape a prison you don't know you're in. Awareness gives you the key. The process of becoming aware starts with observation. Noticing your emotions without trying to fix them. Watching your habits without explaining them away. Listening to your internal dialogue, that constant chatter in your mind, and asking where it came from. Most of us speak to ourselves in ways we would never speak to a friend. We tear ourselves down, shame ourselves, criticize ourselves, and then wonder why we struggle with confidence. Self-awareness teaches you to observe this voice, question it, and eventually, rewire it. Let's say you find yourself procrastinating constantly. You might think, I'm just lazy. That's the surface story. But go deeper. Ask, what am I afraid will happen if I do this task? Maybe the fear is failure. Or judgment. Or maybe you feel the task doesn't align with your values. Suddenly, procrastination isn't just laziness, it's a protective mechanism. And once you understand that, you can change it. Because now you're not fighting yourself blindly. You're working with clarity. Another example, anger. Maybe you snap easily at others. Instead of saying, that's just how I am, ask yourself, what's the story I'm telling myself when I get angry? Often, anger is a secondary emotion. It hides hurt, fear, or unmet needs. When you become aware of the root, you gain power. You're no longer controlled by your reactions. You respond consciously instead of emotionally. And that single shift, from reaction to response, can change the course of your life. It's also important to understand that awareness is not always immediate. It grows over time. The more you practice it, the sharper it becomes. You start to see patterns. You notice that your energy dips every time you scroll social media for too long. You realize that certain people always leave you feeling drained. You begin to catch yourself in the act, not to shame yourself, but to redirect. Awareness gives you the steering wheel. Without it, you're just a passenger in your own life. But there's more. True self-awareness isn't just internal, it's also external. How do people experience you? How does your presence impact others? Do you bring energy or drain it? Do your intentions match your impact? Most people never ask these questions. They assume their perception of themselves is accurate, but it rarely is. We all have blind spots, and it takes humility to let others help us see them. That's why feedback is crucial. Not all feedback, of course, but thoughtful, honest feedback from people who care about your growth. When someone you trust tells you, you interrupt people a lot, or, you seem defensive when you're challenged, that's gold. That's awareness being handed to you. And yes, it stinks, but growth often does. The real challenge with self-awareness is the responsibility it brings. Once you know better, you can't unknow. You can't pretend you didn't see the pattern. You can't blame others for what you now realize was your own self-sabotage. And that can be heavy. It can make you feel exposed. But it's also empowering. Because now, for the first time, you're not a victim of your history. You're the author of your next chapter. Awareness also deepens compassion, for yourself and for others. When you see your own wounds clearly, you start to understand why other people behave the way they do. You stop taking things so personally. You realize that most people aren't trying to hurt you, they're just acting out their own unresolved pain. And that makes forgiveness possible. It makes boundaries healthier. It makes your relationships richer. That's the ripple effect of awareness. It doesn't just change you. It changes how you show up for others. There's also a spiritual element to self-awareness. It reconnects you with presence. In awareness, you stop living in the past or worrying about the future. You inhabit this moment, fully, honestly. And in that space, you remember who you are beneath the noise. Not your job. Not your achievements. Not your failures. Just you. Pure, aware, and capable of choosing differently. That kind of clarity is rare in a world obsessed with doing. But it's necessary for anyone who wants to build something meaningful. You might wonder, what's the first step? The answer is simple but not easy. Begin noticing. That's it. Set a timer on your phone every few hours. When it goes off, ask yourself, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I doing, and why? Over time, you'll build the muscle. You'll catch yourself before the habit kicks in. You'll notice the space between stimulus and response, and that's where power lives. Make awareness a daily practice like brushing your teeth. Don't wait for breakdowns or crises to examine yourself. Do it proactively. Because the more aware you are, the less controlled you are by impulses. The less reactive you become to the world. And the more grounded, intentional, and resilient you grow. In the end, personal development doesn't start with doing more. It starts with seeing more. And when you see clearly, you begin to live consciously. That's where change happens. Not in the hustle. Not in the hype. But in the quiet moment where you finally meet yourself, fully, without judgment, and with the courage to become more. People wait for motivation like it's a miracle, like it's some mysterious force that will suddenly show up one day and lift them out of bed, inject them with energy, and push them into success. They treat motivation like it's a spark that will fix everything the moment it arrives. And for a moment, it does feel that way. Motivation feels like fire, like clarity, like a shot of adrenaline. It makes you want to do everything right now. Read, work, train, build, hustle. But the truth is, motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes like weather. It's unpredictable. It's inconsistent. It's emotional. And you cannot build a life, a legacy, a character on something as unreliable as emotion. That's where discipline comes in. Because discipline is what you do when you no longer feel like doing it. Discipline is the decision to act, not because it feels good, but because you said you would. It's not emotional. It's not exciting. It's consistent. It's gritty. It's stable. And it's what separates the ones who try from the ones who become. The people who succeed in any area of life, whether it's fitness, business, creativity, or leadership, are not always the most talented or inspired. They're the most disciplined. They show up when it's boring. They push forward when it's hard. They stay focused when the world tries to distract them. They act on commitment, not mood. That's what real personal development demands, the ability to choose growth even when every part of you wants comfort. It's easy to act when you feel inspired. It's easy to train when you're fired up. But what do you do when there's no fire, no rush, no external push? That's the moment that defines you. Discipline is forged in those exact moments when motivation is nowhere to be found. People confuse the two all the time. They think motivation leads to discipline. But actually it's the opposite. Discipline leads to motivation. The more you act with discipline, the more you build momentum. And momentum creates results. And results, even small ones, reignite motivation. So, if you wait to feel motivated to take action, you'll be waiting forever. But if you take disciplined action first, even when it's hard, motivation starts to follow like a shadow. It's the law of movement. Once you begin, everything else begins too. Discipline doesn't scream. It whispers. It's the quiet voice in your head at 5 a.m. saying, "Get up." It's the decision to keep writing when the words aren't flowing. It's finishing the workout after the energy runs out. It's honoring the promise you made to yourself long after the excitement wore off. And in that quiet, in that stillness, character is formed. Discipline builds trust with yourself. Every time you keep your word, even privately, especially privately, your identity starts to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and fails. You start becoming someone who follows through. And that identity becomes unshakable. Motivation can lie. It can tell you, "You'll do it tomorrow." Discipline doesn't negotiate. It says, "You're doing it now." Motivation can disappear the moment you feel resistance. Discipline stays when resistance shows up. That's why discipline isn't sexy. It doesn't offer fast results. It doesn't promise shortcuts. But it delivers what motivation never can: consistency. And in personal growth, consistency is everything. You don't get fit in one workout. You don't build confidence in one day. You don't master your craft in 1 week. It's the daily grind, the daily choice, the repetition, over and over again, that slowly, painfully, but surely builds greatness. Discipline is also about setting boundaries, with yourself, with your time, with your energy. It means choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure. It means saying no when you could say yes. It means walking away from distractions that feel good but cost you your future. Social media, meaningless conversations, gossip, comfort food, excuses, they all feel easier in the moment. But discipline asks, What do I want most, not just what I want now? That shift in question transforms your life. Because when you start living for what matters most, you stop settling for what's convenient. Most people don't lack ambition. They lack systems. They lack discipline. They're stuck in a loop of inspired ideas with no execution. They watch videos. They read books. They get hyped. They set big goals. And then, they fall back. Not because they didn't want it, but because they didn't build the muscle of discipline to carry them through the uninspired days. If you only act when it's easy, you'll never grow. But when you act despite difficulty, that's where growth becomes permanent. Discipline is a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. And just like the gym, it's not supposed to feel good at first. It's supposed to hurt a little. That's the point. Pain is part of progress. You must build habits around discipline. Habits protect your progress. They automate success. When you turn discipline into structure, with routines, rituals, time blocks, rules, you eliminate the need for daily motivation. You don't have to think about whether or not to act. You just act. That's freedom. Discipline creates internal freedom because it removes the constant tug-of-war between what you should do and what you want to avoid. There's peace in structure. There's power in routine. There's clarity in planning. And that clarity reduces emotional chaos. You stop asking, "Should I?" and start saying, "I must." Discipline also deepens self-respect. Every time you do what you said you would, especially when no one's watching, you start believing in yourself again. You rebuild the broken contracts you've made with yourself over the years. You know those promises: this time I'll stick with it, I'll start Monday, I'll never quit again. When you break those promises repeatedly, your confidence erodes. But when you keep them, even in small ways, you heal that trust. You stop relying on hype and start relying on integrity. And that kind of confidence is unshakable. There's also a myth that discipline means deprivation, like it's about being hard on yourself, being rigid, robotic. That's false. Discipline isn't punishment. It's alignment. It's choosing what serves you even when it's uncomfortable. It's about building a life that reflects your values, not just your impulses. And over time, what once felt like sacrifice becomes your new normal. What once felt difficult becomes your default. That's when you realize that discipline doesn't limit you, it frees you. It frees you from addiction to comfort, from cycles of regret, from chasing motivation like a drug. It gives you stability. It gives you power. And ultimately, it gives you peace. Discipline also teaches you patience. In a world of instant gratification, discipline says, wait. It says, do the work now. Let the reward come later. That's a skill most people never develop. They want results overnight. They want shortcuts. But shortcuts usually cost more in the long run. Discipline plays the long game. It knows that true change takes time. That's why disciplined people are rarely in a rush. They're steady. They're consistent. They're unshaken by temporary setbacks because they trust the process. And because they trust the process, they win, not quickly but surely. There will be days when discipline feels impossible. Days when your energy is low. Days when your emotions are heavy. Days when the old version of you whispers, just skip it. Just once. And those are the days that matter most. Because on those days, you are either reinforcing weakness or building strength. One action in isolation may not seem like a big deal. But repeated over time, it becomes your identity. You are not defined by what you do occasionally. You are defined by what you do consistently. And that consistency is the result of discipline. Discipline isn't natural. It's not something you're born with. It's chosen. It's trained. It's earned through repetition and resistance. And the more you practice it, the more automatic it becomes. Like brushing your teeth, like tying your shoes, it becomes second nature. And when discipline becomes part of your nature, there is no situation that can break you. You become unstoppable. Because now you're no longer driven by how you feel. You're driven by who you are. The truth is, your future won't be built by your motivation. It will be built by your discipline. Motivation might start the journey, but only discipline will finish it. And the people who finish, the ones who rise, who evolve, who transform, are the ones who did it even when they didn't feel like it. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. You become what you consume. Not instantly, not overnight, but slowly, subtly, consistently. Every word you hear, every image you see, every conversation you engage in, it all becomes part of the architecture of your mind. People underestimate this truth. They fill their lives with noise, never realizing that what enters their consciousness is shaping who they are becoming. Your mind is not a fortress that keeps things out, it's a sponge. And that sponge is soaking up information every second of every day. The real question is, Are you choosing what it soaks up, or are you letting the world decide for you? In the same way your body responds to the food you eat, your mind responds to the content you feed it. Junk in, junk out. If you feed your body fast food every day, you know what happens. You get sluggish. You lose energy. Your health deteriorates. But do the same thing to your mind, fill it with gossip, negativity, meaningless entertainment, constant comparison, and the effect is just as devastating. But because you can't see mental weight the way you see physical weight, you don't realize how much it's weighing you down. Every single day you're being programmed. Whether you're aware of it or not, you are being influenced by what you see, what you hear, what you read, and who you spend time around. The shows you watch, the music you play, the books you read, the people you follow on social media, the conversations you have at lunch. These things don't just pass through you. They stay. They build. They plant seeds. And over time, those seeds take root and shape the way you think, the way you speak, the way you act, and ultimately, the life you live. That's the power of inputs. Most people think they are thinking their own thoughts. But often, what they are really doing is repeating the thoughts they've absorbed from their environment. They say what they've heard. They believe what's been repeated to them. They adopt the fears, doubts, and limitations of the people they've surrounded themselves with. That's not thinking, that's absorbing. And that's dangerous. Because without realizing it, you become a product of your surroundings instead of a creator of your own reality. That's why personal development isn't just about building habits or setting goals, it's about auditing your inputs. It's about taking control of what you allow into your mental space. Imagine your mind like a garden. If you don't actively plant flowers, weeds will grow by default. The weeds are the toxic content, the negative voices, the endless distractions. And they don't need your permission to grow, they thrive on your passivity. But if you're intentional, if you guard your inputs, if you choose your influences deliberately, you can grow something entirely different, something powerful, beautiful, and deeply rooted in truth. This means you must become ruthless about your environment. Not paranoid, not rigid, but deeply selective. Ask yourself, does what I'm consuming serve my growth or sabotage it? Does it expand my thinking or shrink it? Does it make me more focused or more distracted? More grateful or more bitter? More aligned or more lost? Every input moves you in a direction. You get to choose whether it's forward or backward. Look at your phone. Who do you follow? What kind of content dominates your feed? Is it people building, learning, growing, or people complaining, flexing, selling illusions? Your feed is your mental diet. And just like your physical diet, it either fuels you or depletes you. Unfollow what doesn't align. Mute what doesn't inspire. Block what drains you. You're not being rude, you're being responsible. Your mind is your most valuable asset, and you must protect it accordingly. Now look at the conversations you're part of. Are they meaningful or mindless? Do the people around you challenge your thinking, or do they reinforce smallness and fear? Do they support your growth or secretly resent it? The people you spend the most time with shape your beliefs about what's normal, what's possible, what's acceptable. If you spend all your time with people who settle, you will settle. If you're surrounded by people who complain about everything but change nothing, you'll start doing the same. But if you're around people who talk about ideas, purpose, growth, creation, you'll rise. Because elevation is contagious. And then there's the content you read. Books, articles, podcasts, news. All of it is input. And most of it is noise. You have to filter with intention. Not everything that's popular is valuable. Not everything that's trending is worth your attention. Read what challenges you. Listen to what uplifts you. Learn from what stretches your thinking. Feed your curiosity, not your anxiety. Seek wisdom, not just information. There's a big difference. Information fills you. Wisdom transforms you. Sometimes, controlling your inputs means creating space. Silence. Stillness. Because in today's world, input overload is real. Your brain was not designed to process the amount of information it receives daily. Constant pings, notifications, opinions, it creates mental chaos. And in that chaos, clarity dies. You lose your sense of direction, not because you're unmotivated, but because your mind is too cluttered to think clearly. That's why some of your best ideas come in the shower, or on a walk, or in the quiet moments before sleep. It's in the absence of noise that your true voice starts to emerge. This is where boundaries become crucial. You must learn to say no, not just to people, but to platforms, to patterns, to habits that don't serve you. You don't need to consume everything that's available. You don't need to be up to date on every trend, every news story, every opinion. You don't need to respond to every message the second it arrives. You are allowed to be unavailable to the world so you can be fully available to yourself. That's not selfish. That's self-preserving. That's how you reclaim your attention and your focus. It's also important to realize that inputs don't just influence your mind, they influence your emotions. They shift your energy. You could be having a great day, then open your phone and see something that ruins your mood instantly. That's not random. That's input pollution. And it's happening all the time. You must be aware of how different inputs make you feel. Do they energize you or exhaust you? Do they leave you inspired or empty? That awareness is the first step to control. You also have to take responsibility for your digital habits. The algorithm is not evil, it's reactive. It shows you more of what you engage with. So if you click on drama, it feeds you drama. If you watch negativity, it multiplies negativity. But if you engage with wisdom, with learning, with depth, it shows you more of that too. You are not a victim of your digital world. You are a participant. And with a few conscious choices, you can turn your devices from distractions into tools for transformation. The inputs you choose today shape the outputs you produce tomorrow. Your ideas, your language, your creativity, your resilience, they are all byproducts of what you absorb. If you want to be sharper, feed your mind with sharp content. If you want to be wiser, learn from those who've walked the path. If you want to be calm, expose yourself to things that cultivate peace. You don't have to be perfect. But you do have to be aware. Because without awareness, you consume blindly. And when you consume blindly, you become whatever you've been given, not what you've chosen. This isn't about becoming hyper-controlled or obsessively curated. It's about intentional living. About saying, I'm going to choose what shapes me. I'm going to protect my peace. I'm going to create an internal environment that supports my evolution, not sabotages it. That choice, repeated daily, is powerful. And over time, it becomes transformational. Because the truth is, your life is not just built on what you do. It's built on what you absorb. And when you begin to control your inputs, everything starts to shift. Your mood, your focus, your decisions, your trajectory. That's not magic. That's awareness, applied with discipline. That's personal development in its most practical form. Goals are everywhere. You see them on vision boards, scribbled in journals, taped to bathroom mirrors, declared with pride at the beginning of every new year. People set goals for everything: to lose weight, make more money, wake up earlier, read more books, build a business, fix their relationships, find their purpose. And while setting goals has value, there's a deeper layer that most never reach. Goals focus on what you want to have or accomplish. Standards focus on who you are. Goals aim at outcomes. Standards define identity. And without raising your standards, goals are just fantasies with deadlines. Think about how many people set goals they never reach. Not because they didn't want them, but because their standards never changed. They said they wanted to be in shape, but their standard was still hitting snooze, skipping workouts, eating without discipline. They wanted to grow financially, but their standard was still impulsive spending, poor time management, staying stuck in scarcity. The goal was loud, but the standard was low. And when your standards stay low, your life follows. Raising your standards is not about being perfect. It's about deciding what is no longer acceptable. It's drawing a line in the sand and saying, this version of me is expired. And then living like that every single day, not just when it's convenient, not just when people are watching, not just when you feel inspired, but always, consistently, unapologetically. Because you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. Your standards are the invisible rules you live by. They're the baseline of what you tolerate from yourself. And most people never upgrade them. They tolerate mediocrity in the name of patience. They tolerate emotional instability in the name of authenticity. They tolerate inconsistency in the name of self-acceptance. But there's a difference between grace and permission. Grace says, you're human. Permission says, you don't have to grow. Standards don't eliminate grace, they give it direction. There's a reason why two people can face the same challenge and respond completely differently. One person rises, the other collapses. The difference isn't luck. It's not even strength. It's standard. One has decided deep in their bones that certain behaviors, certain attitudes, certain patterns are simply no longer an option. They've set a higher baseline. Not for the world, for themselves. And that baseline governs their behavior. That's the power of internal leadership. That's what real personal development requires. Not more inspiration, but more internal rules. Not externally imposed rules. Self-selected rules. Because when you choose your standards, you stop being ruled by circumstance. Your goals are the direction. Your standards are the vehicle. If the vehicle is broken, the destination doesn't matter. Most people try to sprint toward the life they want while dragging the old version of themselves behind them. They want the rewards of a new life but keep the standards of the old one. That's why progress stalls. That's why the cycle repeats. The outer change they're chasing never sticks, because the inner standard hasn't been redefined. When you raise your standards, you start making decisions from a different place. You ask better questions. Not just, how can I get this result? But, what kind of person must I become to live that result naturally? Because when you become the person who has it, you don't have to chase it, you attract it. Success stops being an event and starts being your normal. You don't have to force discipline. You don't have to fake confidence. You live it, because you are it. And that's where everything changes. This transformation starts with identity. You must ask yourself, what are the standards of the next version of me? How does that person think? How do they move? What do they say no to? What do they no longer tolerate, in themselves, in others, in the world around them? And then begin living that identity before the results show up. That's what most people miss. They wait for the result to feel worthy of the identity. But the truth is, the identity must come first. When your identity shifts, your behavior follows. And when behavior changes, results are inevitable. This is why relying on motivation, willpower, or even vision alone is not enough. Those things fade. But standards, real, non-negotiable standards, endure. They survive bad days. They push through resistance. They hold the line when everything else wants to retreat. They are the silent contract you make with yourself, a contract that says, this is who I am now, regardless of how I feel. It also means raising the standard of what you consume, the content you allow, the conversations you participate in, the thoughts you entertain. If you want to live at a higher level, you can't feed your mind junk and expect clarity. You can't indulge in toxic environments and expect peace. You can't speak self-hate and expect confidence. Your inner world must match the outer world you desire. Standards bridge that gap. You'll face resistance when you raise your standards. Internally and externally. Part of you will scream, who do you think you are? That's your old self trying to survive. It's afraid. Afraid of discomfort. Afraid of change. Afraid of loss. But you must remind yourself, you're not killing the old you. You're evolving beyond them. And others may resist too. Some will feel threatened. Some will call you arrogant. Some will project their own stagnation onto your progress. That's okay. You're not raising standards to impress. You're raising them to express your potential, your integrity, your alignment with what's possible for you. There's a sacred power in deciding that certain things are no longer acceptable in your life. Certain excuses, certain patterns, certain energies. You don't even have to make an announcement. Let your energy speak it. Let your behavior declare it. Let your consistency prove it. Because when your standards are internalized, they become part of your presence. You don't have to defend them. You simply live them. The beauty of high standards is that they elevate everything. When you set a higher standard in one area, like health, you start raising standards elsewhere. You think clearer. You lead better. You feel stronger. It's a ripple effect. Because standards are contagious. They reflect how much you respect yourself. And self-respect bleeds into every part of your life. Relationships, work, boundaries, dreams. The work isn't easy. Raising your standards means being honest about where you've been lowering them. It means confronting the parts of you that have been settling, not because you're weak, but because you forgot how powerful you are. It means facing your patterns not to shame them, but to upgrade them. Because every version of you served a purpose, even the one that settled, procrastinated, avoided. But that version is no longer required. What's required now is the version of you who leads with intention, who honors their vision with action, who stops waiting for the world to change and becomes the change internally first. Raising your standards is not a one-time decision. It's a daily alignment. It's not glamorous. It's not loud. It's subtle. It's the invisible choice to do things right when no one is watching. It's staying late to finish, getting up early to start, showing up when it's easier to check out. It's walking away from drama. It's saying no to opportunities that don't fit your purpose. It's the quiet pride of living in full alignment with who you said you would be. And perhaps most importantly, raising your standards doesn't just change your results. It changes your experience of yourself. You begin to walk differently. You carry yourself with a quiet power. You no longer need validation because you live in validation. Not from others, from within. Because every day you prove to yourself that you are someone who can be counted on. And that kind of self-trust is rare. It's valuable. is transformational, and it's available the moment you decide that the old you is done and the new you begins now.